So Mr. Mike Pompeo has come out with a new book and it's filled with bombshells. Here today to talk about this with us is Martin Pengelly. I'm Jessica Burbank. This is The Conversation. Martin is a breaking news editor for The Guardian in the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, Martin.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's get into it. One of the first things that Mike Pompeo has talked about that you all have reported on is the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. He said this was false outrage. He said a number of things about it, that he was framed as the Saudi Arabian Bob Woodward and martyred for his bravery, criticizing the Saudi royal family. But in reality, it's Pompeo's belief that he was an activist who supported the losing team. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, Pompeo is speaking with typical pugnacity, which is what he does, about the Khashoggi affair. He does deplore the murder of Khashoggi in very strong terms, very strong Pompeo terms. But he is, it's one of his vehicles for attacking the US and the world media for how they covered him at the State Department and how they covered Donald Trump in the White House. And so he says Khashoggi wasn't really a journalist, he was an activist. And he says this is what the Middle East is like. Nobody should have been surprised by what happened in the Turkish consulate. And today, in response to a Washington Post statement from the Washington Post publisher Fred Ryan that was very, very strong in rebuking what he said, and I guess in response to Khashoggi's widow, Pompeo came out and said he would never apologize for being more concerned about US servicemen abroad, which obviously in Saudi has relevance to why the US is close to the Saudi regime and why the Trump administration chose to stay close, which is what he describes on the page. But it's expressed in very forceful, very pugnacious, very inflammatory terms, as we've seen today.
Right. Do you see this as, the widow has stated, these are people talking about, her late husband to make money? Or do you see it as Pompeo sort of correcting the record and establishing his sort of view on the matter?
Well, I think we knew it was his view. I think it's for money in the sense that this book is a book to sell, a book for Pompeo to sell. I'm not sure if he's got a huge advance for it, but it's a book to sell. It's a book to make his mark on the nascent Republican presidential primary, which most people expect him to enter. It's not the only book like this that's come out already. Mike Pence is out. Tom Cotton, of all people, came out with one before almost immediately saying he wasn't going to run, but Ron DeSantis is coming out with one next month. It's what you do. You sell a book, you sell your memoirs, and in this case, you publish it when the primary is beginning to form. So in that case, the widow is entirely correct. It's a book to make money, and it's a book full of this Pompeo a sort of attack dog politics that plays to the Republican base. He's very, very, very harsh about the mainstream media and about Democrats, obviously, throughout the book.
Right, Nikki Haley was one of those who was the target, of what he wanted to convey in this book, sort of framing her as this political opportunist, making these meetings with the chief of staff of the White House. And Haley has spoken out and said some things about Pompeo as well. What do you make of his angle on Haley?
The angle on Haley, one thing I would make of it would be that when we ran that story last week, Maggie Haberman of the New York Times swung in with some tweets about the story and was saying that her own reporting had dug up the rumors that Haley was trying to replace Mike Pence on the ticket in 2018-19. It was 2019 when Trump came out and denied that it was true, which made you think it probably was if he came out and decided to deny it. In one sense, accusing a member of the Trump administration of political intriguing is like accusing water of being wet. It seems very, very likely. Haley is also expected to announce the run for president. She's come closer than even Pompeo into saying she's going to do it. She hasn't declared yet, but she nearly has. I liked, not to make a partisan point, but I thought it was very well put. I thought Ben Rhodes, Barack Obama's foreign policy advisor and speechwriter, made a very good point in response to our story when he tweeted that Pompeo and Haley were engaged in a fight to the death to see who can raise 1% support in the primary. they're not very likely to be in the front rank. Now, if I'm wrong and one of them is in the front rank and one of them is the next nominee or the next president, I will happily eat those words. But it is a lot of jostling. I think I called it that in print somewhere. It's jostling before the primary. Haley has also published 2 books since she left the Trump administration, so she's in the same game.
And how much do you really see these books that people are coming out with where they're telling their side of what happened during the Trump administration and their essential stance within the Republican Party? How much do you think these books are swaying voters?
I don't know if they'll sway voters. I don't know if they'll sway voters even in the primary. I mean, general election voters, they ain't reading them. Sadly, I am. It's what I've started doing for my living. There's not much in there that you would read as a general voter. As a Republican primary voter, polling so far suggests maybe no one's going to pay much attention to these ones because Trump and DeSantis dominate it so much. I did notice the Washington Post released a review of Pompeo's book today, and I thought it was accurate. It is a surprisingly nasty book in the sense that he is attacking both his opponents like Haley or his prospective opponents, and of course his typical Republican targets, trying to make the splash. So his having picked a fight with the Post over Khashoggi seems pretty distasteful to me, but it's probably the aim, really. I mean, he's called his book "Never Give an Inch," and he's not giving an inch to the Post today in his response to their statement. That's what this is. It's almost like performance art in a way.
Yeah, anybody who's written about Pompeo with their autocorrect on for their spelling has noticed that it frequently autocorrects to pompous, which I don't think is a coincidence at all. It's quite poetic. He did talk about John Bolton in this book, saying that Donald Trump had called him a scumbag loser. Can you say some more about the Bolton affair? And is this connected to, I don't know, he talked a lot about, Pompeo did, his position as Secretary of State, potentially being considered also for position in NSA and Secretary of Defense as the National Security Advisor to Trump. He wanted to hold all of these, it seems, and was bragging that he was considered for them. And Bolton sort of became a target in this book as well.
I think in terms of the multiple jobs thing, Pompeo, he probably is boasting that it was raised with him. He says he turned down the idea of being Secretary of Defense, and he says the National Security Advisor offer was never really a starter. But he's still making sure he puts that he could have done all 3 or 2 at once. Bolton is his target because Bolton wrote his own book in summer 2020. Or late summer 2020, The Room Where It Happened, named after a Hamilton song, I think. I'm not a Hamilton expert. Which revealed a lot that he wasn't supposed to reveal. The Trump administration tried to stop him publishing it and couldn't. It revealed things like how Trump treated autocrats like the Chinese leader and so on. It was seen as damaging to Trump in the election year in 2020. So Pompeo really goes for Bolton over that. He calls Bolton himself some pretty bad things. He at one point says he compares him to Edward Snowden, but says at least Snowden had some principles. It's pretty. It's a sort of full frontal assault on Bolton. John Bolton has said he might run for president, which would be he'd be fighting, I would think, without me. I don't mean this as any personal criticism of John Bolton, but you'd think a figure like John Bolton, a national security advisor, would be lucky to get close to 0.5% in the base. But it's said he might run a presidential run to try and stop Donald Trump. So this is all Republicans fighting in a sack like ferrets at the moment, actually. And it would be perhaps the same before a Democratic primary if the nomination was open, there wasn't a president involved. I don't think it would be quite as vicious if it was Democrats going at it. This is Trumpian politics. That was what the Washington Post book review very wisely said. This is a very Trumpian affair. It's nasty already.
Yeah, entirely nasty. He was aggressive, it seems, throughout the entire book, but unusually polite about Mike Pence. Can we make of anything that politically? Well,
they both committed. I suppose the right word would be evangelical Christians. They're both strongly Christian. Pompeo, unlike Pence, I've read Pence's book too. Pence carries himself much more mild-mannered way, even though he's obviously got sharp elbows. Pompeo is they share the Christianity. They seem to have shared a kind of alliance within the Trump administration. They are two people who very rarely were in the Trump administration all 4 years. VP and Pompeo was CIA director before he was Secretary of State. So they're two survivors in that sense. I don't doubt for a second Pompeo would turn his fire on Pence in the primary if he needed to. But in the book, relatively speaking, he doesn't. He also relatively doesn't go after Donald Trump. He has been trying to put some daylight between the two of them, but mostly Trump gets away with it. He's not aiming at him. I've said to a couple of colleagues that it's called Never Give an Inch, and when he's describing how he interacted with Trump, a couple of times he describes having given an inch to Trump. So that is the measure of the book. It's a very politically targeted and chosen book.
It's so fascinating. Really appreciate your perspective on all of this and the good work you're doing reporting breaking news with The Guardian. Can you tell our viewers where to find more of your work?
Yeah, theguardian.com, and I tweet at Martin Pengelly, which is pretty much the only social media platform I use.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.